The Texas sun beat down on the cracked pavement as Aaliyah Carter pulled her sedan into a dusty gas station on the outskirts of Ridgewell County. She kept her movements calm and deliberate, topping off her tank, ignoring the eyes she felt on her from the moment she stepped out. This was a town where strangers were noticed instantly, and black strangers were noticed twice as fast. Aaliyah kept her sunglasses on, her posture relaxed, but her mind was working at full speed. She was deep undercover, and today was supposed to be routine. But the moment she capped the pump, blue and red lights flashed behind her in silence. No siren, just pressure. Deputy Reed stepped out first, swagger in every step, hand already resting on his holster. License and registration. He barked, not even bothering with a greeting. Aaliyah kept her voice steady. Of course, officer. May I ask the reason for the stop? Reed smirked as if the question itself insulted him. Your vehicle looks out of place. That's reason enough. She handed him her documents, watching him through the mirror as he walked back to his cruiser without another word. She knew exactly what he was doing, waiting, stalling, building pressure. It was a familiar pattern she'd observed many times during her 17-month investigation into Ridgewell corruption. But the tension around her felt heavier today. Something was coming. Reed made her wait 30 minutes before backup arrived. 2 more cars, and finally a black SUV with Sheriff Dalton himself stepping out, wearing his age and authority like a weapon. The sheriff approached with deliberate slowness, eyes sweeping her like he already knew the ending of a story she hadn't begun to tell. Step out of the vehicle, he ordered, and though she complied, her pulse sharpened. Deputy Reed reports you were uncooperative, Dalton said. I've been nothing but respectful, she replied. But Dalton had already decided his truth. He popped her trunk without permission, rummaging through her equipment bag before she could speak. Then he found her backup phone. What's this? He asked, lifting it. She answered calmly, my personal property. Dalton lifted it high and smashed it onto the concrete. Once, twice, 3 times, until the screen was a glittering mess of shards. A gasp came from a bystander, but no one intervened. Dalton turned to the silent spectators, raising the shattered phone as if proving a point. This woman tried to record officers during a lawful stop, he declared loudly, planting seeds he knew would grow fast in small-town soil. Aaliyah swallowed the rise of emotion in her throat. That is destruction of property, she said evenly. And I will be filing a formal complaint. Dalton leaned in so close she could smell the coffee on his breath. Not from where you're going. Deputy Reed seized her wrists, cold metal cuffs biting into her skin, forcing her to her knees as heat radiated through the pavement. She heard murmurs around her, felt heavy silence settle over the witnesses. You're under arrest for attempting to strike an officer, Dalton announced, manufacturing the charge as smoothly as reciting a weather report. I didn't touch anyone, she said, but Reed shoved her forward, guiding her roughly toward the patrol car. Inside the back seat, the air was stale, oppressive. Through the dusty window, she saw Dalton approaching a teenage boy recording everything, intimidating him until the boy dropped his phone and scrambled away. Evidence erased. Fear restored. Familiar patterns. But Dalton didn't know something important. Something that made Aaliyah's breathing steady, even as adrenaline raced through her veins. Under her left pant leg, above her ankle, inside a hidden seam of her shoe, a microtransmitter the size of a grain of rice pulsed quietly. It sent everything, audio, location, timestamps, to a secure federal server. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't alone. She never was. At the station, they led her past the front desk, past walls lined with old photographs of sheriffs who all looked like descendants of the same family. The interrogation room was bare, no camera in the bracket, no recording device in sight. Dalton dropped a thick folder onto the metal table. You know what this is? He asked. She didn't answer. Your file, he continued. Fake activism arrests, disorderly conduct, trespassing. Enough to paint you unstable. He smirked. Unless you sign a statement admitting you lied about us and get out of Ridgewell County today. Aaliyah sat motionless, her hands cuffed, her eyes unreadable. She had been trained for situations just like this, situations designed to break a person's mind before their body. I'd like to speak to your superior, she said. Dalton laughed, a sharp, unkind sound. There is no superior here, he said. You're in my house. Hours later, dehydrated and exhausted, She was moved to a holding cell that felt like a forgotten storage closet. No window, no ventilation, just the hum of overhead lights and the echo of her heartbeat. She sat on the bench, pushing aside her exhaustion, planning, timing, options, weak points. She remained steady, because panic was a luxury she had never needed. When Deputy Reed checked on her, she lifted her chin. "I need to speak to Sheriff Dalton," she said. He returned 15 minutes later. Dalton entered with that same smug confidence. "Ready to confess?" he said. Aaliyah slowly removed her shoe, slipped out a hidden badge thin enough to fold into a wallet slit, and held it up. "Special Agent Aaliyah Carter, FBI." For a moment, a breath, a blink, Dalton froze. Shock cracked through his arrogance. But only for a moment. Then the laughter returned. "Fake," he declared, snatching the badge. He held it to the fluorescent light. "Amazon sells better replicas." He called the FBI public line, and, just as Aaliyah expected, the operator denied knowing her. Standard protocol. He tossed the badge back at her feet. "Nice try," he said. He released her the next morning with one warning: leave Ridgewell County. You won't get a second chance. But Aaliyah Carter didn't leave. She walked straight into the town council meeting, past citizens who whispered, past men who smirked, past the sheriff who watched her with amused disbelief. She stood tall behind the microphone, her voice unshaking. "My name is Aaliyah Carter," she said, "and I'm here to report a crime." The entire room went silent. The council chambers smelled like old paper and floor polish, like too many meetings where nothing really changed. Aaliyah stood at the microphone, the cheap plastic base slightly wobbling under her fingertips. Rows of folding chairs faced her, half filled with townspeople who had nothing else to do on a weekday afternoon except watch their leaders pretend everything was fine. At the front sat the council members on a raised platform, and in the center, under the town seal, sat Mayor Ellen Granger with her hands folded, eyes sharp behind thin-framed glasses. Sheriff Dalton lounged in the front row to the side, one arm thrown over the back of a chair, a small amused smile tugging at his mouth like this was all a show he'd seen 100 times. "My name is Aaliyah Carter," she repeated, steady, letting the microphone carry her voice. "And I'm here to report a crime committed by members of your law enforcement." That word, "your," hung in the air like a challenge. A ripple went through the room. Someone coughed. A child shifted on their parent's lap. The woman from the gas station, the one whose eyes had brimmed with tears as Aaliyah was handcuffed, sat near the back now. She stared at her own hands, fingers twisted together tight, not daring to look up. Mayor Granger lifted her gavel but didn't bring it down. "Ms. Carter," she said, voice smooth, almost soothing, "our agenda today is full. If you have a complaint about law enforcement, there are proper channels for that. You were already processed yesterday on charges of resisting and attempting to assault an officer. This is not the time or place to relitigate your arrest." The word "processed" slid across Aaliyah's nerves like a blade. "I didn't assault anyone," she said. "I was stopped without cause, detained without explanation, and witnessed the destruction of my property by Sheriff Dalton. That is not processing. That is abuse of power." Dalton chuckled loudly, drawing eyes, performing for the room. "Here we go," he said. "The conspiracy show." He stood without being invited, speaking from his spot in the front row so everyone could see the uniform, the badge, the star. "Ms. Carter here," he announced, "claims to be some kind of FBI agent. Showed me a fake badge, called herself Special Agent. We checked with the Bureau. They've never heard of her." He paused for effect. Snickers traveled through the seats like a virus. "She's just another outsider trying to stir up trouble and play victim when she gets caught." Aaliyah felt dozens of eyes shift fully onto her now, studying, judging, some pitying, some hostile. The mayor raised a brow. "Is that true, Ms. Carter?" Granger asked. "Did you present yourself as an FBI agent?" Aaliyah met her gaze. "I am an FBI agent," she said, clear and calm. "I am currently assigned to a federal investigation involving this county." Granger's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "That's interesting," she replied. "Because when we contacted the regional office this morning, they informed us that you are not in their system. In fact," she picked up a folder, flipping through pages theatrically. "We were told you washed out of training years ago and have been misrepresenting yourself ever since." The lie wasn't even particularly creative, but it didn't have to be. It just had to be loud and official. Aaliyah's fingers tightened around the microphone. You spoke to someone who is lying to you, she said. This town has been used for years as a cash machine, and your sheriff is running it. Migrants, undocumented workers, anyone who can't fight back, they are threatened, extorted, forced to pay money they don't have. I have recordings. I have names. I have dates. She scanned the room, searching for even one pair of eyes willing to meet hers. The boy from the gas station sat near the aisle, shoulders hunched. He looked at her for half a second, then looked away as Dalton's gaze swept the crowd like a spotlight. Enough. Mayor Granger's tone hardened. She tapped the gavel once. We will not allow baseless accusations against our law enforcement officers in this chamber. You were arrested yesterday on legitimate charges. According to the incident report, you became aggressive during a traffic stop, attempted to interfere with an investigation, and resisted lawful instructions. She read from the folder as if it held holy writ, not fiction typed a few hours earlier. If you believe you were treated unfairly, you may file a formal complaint through the county clerk's office. Until then, you are out of order. Aaliyah felt the injustice like a weight pressing on her chest, but she kept her breathing slow, her face neutral. I will file that complaint, she said, and I will submit my evidence to federal authorities. This council is being given a chance to hear the truth first, to stand on the right side of what's coming. The mayor's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? No, Aaliyah replied softly. It's a warning. Dalton barked out a laugh, shaking his head. You see why we had to take her in? He said to no one in particular. Listen to her. Delusional. Dangerous. Granger lifted the gavel again. Your time is up, Miss Carter. Please sit down, or you will be removed. The weight of the crowd's silence pressed harder than the heat had at the gas station. People shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. No one stood. No one asked a single question about extortion, about migrants, about ruined lives. Fear held them in place more tightly than any handcuffs. Aaliyah stepped back from the microphone. For a second, her eyes found the woman from the gas station. The woman's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, but when Aaliyah gave her the smallest nod of acknowledgement, the woman looked away, staring at the floor again. The message was clear. We see you. We believe you. But we are too afraid to stand with you. Not yet. Outside, the afternoon sun felt harsher, the air heavier. The council doors swung shut behind Aaliyah with a final, echoing thud. She walked down the steps slowly, each footfall measured, as if she were stepping through something invisible and sticky. Years of silence, layers of intimidation. Halfway across the parking lot, a voice called her name. She turned. The teenage boy from the gas station jogged toward her, phone clutched tightly in his hand. Sweat beaded at his hairline. I'm sorry, he blurted out, not meeting her eyes. Yesterday, when I was recording, Sheriff Dalton made me delete it. He said if I didn't, he'd arrest my dad. His voice shook. I wanted to keep it. I swear. But I couldn't. Aaliyah held up a hand gently. You don't have to apologize, she said. You did more than most people would have. He swallowed, shoulders slumping with relief and shame all at once. Are you really FBI? He whispered. Yes, she said simply. And you're not crazy? He asked, the brutal honesty of youth slicing through the tension. She allowed herself the smallest smile. Depends on who you ask, she answered. But no, I'm not crazy. I'm just not scared of them anymore. He nodded, clutching his phone like a lifeline. They're scared of you, he said quietly. You can tell. That's why they're doing all this. Then he backed away, eyes darting nervously toward the building, and disappeared into the cluster of parked trucks. At the motel that night, alone in a room that smelled faintly of bleach and stale air, Aaliyah sat on the edge of the bed and opened her encrypted tablet. Lines of text and audio file names filled the screen. 17 months of work. 17 months of small conversations in dim back rooms, whispered testimonies in parking lots and fields and cramped kitchens. She remembered the first woman she'd interviewed, a mother who had paid nearly everything she had to keep her husband from being reported. The way that woman's hands shook as she spoke. The way she'd kept glancing at the window, as if expecting flashing lights at any moment. Back then, Aaliyah had promised herself something, that she would not walk away, no matter how deep this corruption went, until someone powerful finally faced consequences. That vow felt heavier tonight, but it also felt sharper. The council's dismissal, Dalton's mockery, They weren't signs to retreat. They were proof she was hitting the right nerves. What she needed now was leverage. More than hidden recordings, more than testimony from people the system already dismissed. She needed an insider. A name flashed in her notes. Jordan Hayes, former Ridgewell deputy, terminated 3 years earlier. Reason listed: insubordination. Reason reported by a quiet source: refused to follow illegal orders. She tapped his file open, scanning the last known address. The job listed: auto repair, an old shop on the edge of town. The next day, heat shimmered above the asphalt as she pulled into the gravel lot of Hayes Auto. The building was squat, sun-faded, with a hand-painted sign hanging crookedly above the open bay. Inside, under the hood of a pickup, stood a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, oil-stained rag tossed over his shoulder, grease on his forearms. He didn't look up when her car door shut. "We're booked up today," he called. "I'm not here for a tune-up," Aaliyah replied, walking closer. "Jordan Hayes?" He stiffened almost imperceptibly, then straightened and turned to face her. His eyes swept over her, taking in every detail in a single practiced glance. "Former cop eyes." "Who's asking?" he said. She held his gaze. "Agent Aaliyah Carter," she said quietly. "FBI. No badge this time. No props. Just the truth and the weight behind it." His jaw clenched. "You're the woman they arrested yesterday," he said. "The one calling herself an agent." The way he said it made it clear he didn't fully buy Dalton's version, but fear had drawn lines in his expression that experience had carved deep. "You used to work with them," she said. "You know what they're capable of." His laugh was humorless. "That's exactly why you need to get back in your car and drive away," he said. "Whatever you think you're going to do to Dalton, you won't. Nobody wins against him. They just disappear or move away." "What did you refuse to do?" she asked softly. "What order got you fired?" His eyes hardened, a brief flash of old hurt surfacing before he shoved it back down. "Doesn't matter," he said. "It mattered enough to end your career," she replied. "It matters to the people he's still hurting." He grabbed a wrench, turning back to the truck as if that could end the conversation. "Lady, you have no idea what you're up against." "Yes," she said quietly. "I do. I've seen the ledger. The patterns. The fear in people's eyes. I know about the cash drops, the threats, the offshore accounts. I also know there are good people who try to stop it and got crushed." He froze at the word ledger, just for a heartbeat. That was all she needed to see. She'd hit something real. "Whatever you think you know, keep it to yourself," Jordan said, voice lower now, the edge of panic creeping in. "They'll burn this place to the ground. They'll hurt my family. They've done it before." He finally turned, eyes blazing with a mix of anger and terror. "I'm not brave," he said. "Not anymore. I'm just trying to survive." Aaliyah didn't argue. She didn't say the words she wanted to, about duty, about justice, about how surviving in silence was also a kind of slow death. She simply nodded once. "If you change your mind," she said, "I'll be around. And I'll still be fighting." She walked back to her car, feeling his gaze between her shoulder blades. Before she started the engine, she saw him in the rearview mirror, standing in the bay, rag in his hands, staring at nothing. The town was still choosing fear. The system was still choosing corruption. But fear had cracks now. Tiny, hairline fractures where truth had slipped in and refused to leave. As Aaliyah drove away, the motel room, the council chamber, the gas station, the auto shop, all of it played in her mind like puzzle pieces that hadn't clicked yet. Not yet, but they would. She had recordings. She had patterns. And somewhere in this town, hidden under years of silence and threats, was the proof that could bring everything crashing down. She just had to survive long enough to find it. Night settled over Ridgewell in a thick, unmoving blanket, the kind that made the whole town seem to hold its breath. Aaliyah sat in her car outside the dimly lit auto shop long after Jordan Hayes had walked away from her. His refusal lingered in her thoughts, not as a defeat, but as confirmation of just how deep the fear ran here. People didn't just avoid speaking. They avoided thinking about speaking. Fear had become so familiar it felt like oxygen. But fear also left trails. Cracks. Soft places where truth could take root. And she had felt something shift in Jordan's eyes. The split second when her mention of the ledger shook him. She drove back to her motel slowly, replaying every detail of their conversation. The ledger was real. He knew it. His reaction told her everything she needed to know. Sheriff Dalton kept records, paper, old school, handwritten, because he didn't trust digital systems. That meant somewhere in the sheriff's office, behind a locked door, or inside a hidden safe, was the document that could end all of this. A single book containing the names of victims, the dates of payments, the extorted amounts, and the signatures of the people who ran the operation. It was the kind of evidence prosecutors built entire cases around. If Aaliyah could get it, she wouldn't just expose the corruption, she would collapse the entire system. But first she needed help. The next morning, the motel manager slid her key under the door with a note attached. Staff cannot be involved in disputes with law enforcement. Please resolve conflicts elsewhere. It wasn't an eviction notice, but it was a warning, a reminder of whose shadow stretched over this town. She pocketed the note and headed out before sunrise, stopping at the only cafe open before 6 a.m. The air inside smelled of burnt coffee and buttered toast, the comforting sort of aroma that usually marked safe places. But the people inside didn't look safe. Their eyes darted to the windows each time a police cruiser drove by. Aaliyah took a booth in the corner. Moments later, the waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, approached with a pot of coffee. She poured silently, but her hands trembled just enough to reveal nerves. Without being asked, she leaned slightly closer and whispered, "You're the woman who stood up at the council meeting." Aaliyah tensed. "Yes," she said softly. The woman's eyes flicked to the door, checking for uniforms. "That took guts," she murmured. "Most folks around here lost theirs a long time ago." "Why?" Aaliyah asked gently. "What did he do to you?" The waitress swallowed, the muscles in her throat tightening. "Not me," she said. "My son. They stopped him 2 years ago. Said he matched a suspect description. Took him in. Kept him for hours. Told me if I filed a complaint, they'd find drugs in his car next time." Her eyes glistened, but she forced the tears back. "We moved him to Lubbock last year. It was the only way I could sleep." She straightened, composure returning. "Careful what you stir up, honey. Some dirt don't settle." Then she walked away before Aaliyah could respond. The message was clear. The town was full of stories like this. People who had quietly chosen survival over resistance. But quiet didn't mean indifferent. Quiet meant desperate. And desperation was fertile ground for change. Later that morning, her encrypted phone buzzed with a text from an unknown relay. "We need to talk." Behind the old mill. Noon. No signature. No indication of safety. But something about the phrasing felt familiar. Direct. Cautious. Controlled. It reminded her of someone who had been trained to hide fear behind clarity. Jordan. At noon, the sky hung heavy with humidity as she parked behind the abandoned mill. Rusted machinery leaned like skeletons against cracked concrete walls. A breeze carried the smell of dust and forgotten years. Jordan stepped out from behind a support beam, shoulders tense, jaw set. "I shouldn't have contacted you," he said before she could speak. "It's stupid and dangerous, and I already regret it." But he didn't walk away. That meant something. "I'm listening," Aaliyah said quietly. Jordan rubbed the back of his neck, pacing a few steps before stopping. "Last night, 2 deputies parked outside my house," he said. "Didn't knock. Didn't say anything. Just sat there with their lights off for over an hour." His eyes hardened. "That hasn't happened since the week I lost my badge." It was a reminder. A reminder of what they can still do to me. Aaliyah absorbed that silently. Fear was starting to squeeze him again, but fear didn't drive him to disappear. It drove him to her. "They know you talked to me," she said. He shook his head. "No. They suspect. They always suspect. They watch everyone." He took a slow breath. "The ledger is real," he finally admitted. "Dalton keeps it in a safe inside his office. Only he and the mayor have the combo. Even deputies aren't allowed near it." His voice dropped lower. "It's handwritten. Every payout. Every threat. Every name. 20 years of crime documented by his own arrogance." He looked up at her, expression sharp with conflict. "If you get that ledger, they won't just go down, they'll go down hard." Aaliyah met his gaze. "Then help me get it." His face crumpled with frustration. "I can't break in there," he whispered. "I can't go near the station. They'd drag me back into a cell and lose the key." He stopped pacing, shoulders sagging. But his voice trailed off. "But what?" she pressed. He exhaled. "But there might be a way for you to get inside without them realizing who you are." He dug into his pocket and pulled out an old security card, worn edges, faded logo. "This still opens the back maintenance door. They never deactivated it after I left." Dalton doesn't believe in updating systems unless it benefits him. He held the card out, but Aaliyah didn't take it yet. What changed your mind? She asked. Jordan didn't hesitate. I saw the way you stood in that council meeting, he said. Everyone else in that room was too scared to breathe. But you didn't even flinch. He shook his head. People like that, they don't come around often. And when they do, they're usually the ones who crack the dam. He extended the card farther. So if anyone can finish what I was too afraid to start, it's you. Aaliyah took the card. But just as her fingers closed around it, Jordan grabbed her wrist lightly. His voice was urgent. If you go after that ledger, he said, you won't get a second chance. Dalton will come for you. Aaliyah's reply was steady. He already has. Jordan let her go. As Aaliyah drove away from the mill, her pulse steady but her mind racing, she understood something with absolute clarity. The people of Ridgewell weren't waiting for a savior. They were waiting for a spark. Something to show them the system wasn't invincible. Something to prove their silence didn't equal defeat. And she was going to be that spark, even if it meant lighting the whole rotten structure on fire. The next 48 hours unfolded like a tightening noose, each hour tugging the rope a little closer around Aaliyah's mission, her freedom, and her life. She returned to her motel room after meeting Jordan, the old security card warm in her pocket like a pulsing heartbeat. It was the first real opening she'd found in months. A path into the beast's den. A chance at the ledger that could break the sheriff's entire empire. But that small taste of progress came with a bitter aftertaste, because the deeper she stepped into truth, the more aggressively the walls of Ridgewell began to close around her. The first blow came that evening. Her encrypted phone vibrated with a secure alert. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Device integrity at risk. Aaliyah stiffened. Someone had hacked into her backup laptop. Someone with high-level clearance. Someone who shouldn't know that device even existed. She opened her tablet and checked the server logs. Her reports, months' worth of evidence, interviews, audio files, had been opened by a user inside the regional FBI office in San Antonio. It was her supervisor, Isaac Graham Rivers. Her chest tightened. Rivers was the one she'd trusted to back her operation, to protect her intel, to ensure federal oversight. But the log files told a different story. Rivers had forwarded her confidential reports not to headquarters, but straight to Ridgewell's district attorney. And the DA had forwarded them again to a private address labeled only as WD. Warren Dalton. Sheriff Dalton. Aaliyah stared at the screen, pulse pounding. The betrayal tasted metallic, bitter. It wasn't negligence. It wasn't bureaucratic sloppiness. This was deliberate leaking. A federal supervisor helping a corrupt sheriff stay ahead of an ongoing investigation. She felt the weight of it settle into her bones. She wasn't just fighting a corrupt town. She was fighting a system infected at multiple levels. Her next move came as instinct, not strategy. She exited her motel room and drove an hour out of Ridgewell County, far enough to avoid tracking, far enough to breathe. She parked in a half-empty diner lot and sat still until her hands stopped trembling. Then she pulled up the contact file she'd saved for emergencies. Investigative journalist, national syndication. Maya Thornton. Aaliyah had never met her in person but knew her reputation well. Fearless, relentless, impossible to silence. The kind of journalist who could expose a rotten tree by lifting the entire forest canopy. Aaliyah dialed. Maya answered on the second ring, voice groggy but alert. This better be good. It's not even dawn. It's better than good, Aaliyah said. It's corruption. Federal and local. Active and ongoing. That woke her. Who am I speaking to? Special Agent Aaliyah Carter, undercover assignment Ridgewell County. And I need your help. Silence. Then a quiet, interested chuckle. Go on. Aaliyah summarized months of recordings, dozens of victims, offshore accounts, extortion rings, and now, federal betrayal. Maya didn't interrupt once. When Aaliyah finished, the journalist exhaled sharply. You just handed me enough to light half the state on fire, Maya said. But if your chain of command is compromised, you're not just blowing the whistle. You're detonating your own safety. I already detonated it, Aaliyah said. Now I need to expose the fallout. Maya's tone shifted, crisp and controlled. We need a press conference. Public. Impossible to shut down. I agree, Aaliyah said. And I need someone to authenticate the evidence. A judge, ideally. I know the perfect one, Maya said. Retired federal judge from Houston. Iron spine. Zero tolerance for dirty cops. Aaliyah felt hope stir in her chest, faint but alive. Can you get her? I can get her, Maya said. But this conference needs to happen fast. Before they erase you. 2 days, Aaliyah said. Friday morning. Done. Send me your dead man's switch contact. When the call ended, Aaliyah's resolve was carved in stone. But Ridgewell wasn't done pushing back. Later that morning, she returned to her original motel to grab the last of her belongings. Her stomach dropped when she saw her door cracked open. Her pulse sharpened as she drew her concealed weapon, sweeping the room. Everything had been rifled through, mattress upended, drawers emptied, clothes scattered. And her backup laptop, the one that triggered the integrity alert hours earlier, gone. She gritted her teeth, fury burning beneath her ribs. They were escalating, searching her room, seizing equipment, testing how far they could push before she broke. She refused to break. Aaliyah moved to a different motel 2 counties away, paid in cash, kept the lights low. But as soon as she sat on the bed, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message, leave now. We won't warn you again. At the bottom, a photo. Aaliyah's car parked outside her new motel. Her blood ran cold. They were tracking her. They knew exactly where she was. She locked the doors, closed the curtains, and forced her breathing steady. Then, with calm precision, she activated her dead man's switch, uploading the evidence to secure servers with timed release encryption. Even if they destroyed everything she carried, she would not be erased. But the danger deepened. That night, another message arrived. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Highway 19. We will escort you out of town. Refuse, and we escort you into the ground. The threat was clear. The timeline was shorter. The window was shrinking. Aaliyah spent the night wide awake, replaying every move she had left. Her mind drifted to the ledger, the one tangible piece no one could discredit. If she could get it before the press conference, the case would be unbreakable. But breaking into the sheriff's office required 2 things she didn't yet have: timing and luck. She had neither. But she had Jordan's access card. And hope, dangerous, stubborn hope, sparked again in her chest when her encrypted line buzzed at dawn with a message from him. They came to my house again. We need to hurry. Meet me. Aaliyah grabbed her gear. This time, she wasn't moving in the shadows. She wasn't avoiding their gaze. She was stepping straight into the fire. Because the system was cracking. Because fear was crumbling. Because truth was rising. And part 4 ended with a single, undeniable fact. Ridgewell wasn't just threatened anymore. Ridgewell was trembling. Dawn crept over Ridgewell under a sky the color of bruised steel, the kind of morning that felt like it was holding something back. Aaliyah drove through the pale light with her jaw tight and mind alert, following the coordinates Jordan had sent. She found him waiting near an abandoned grain silo outside town, pacing with restless, haunted movements. His eyes were bloodshot, and his shirt was wrinkled like he hadn't slept. When she pulled up, he didn't waste time on greetings. They were back at my house last night, he said, voice low and shaking. Sitting in their cars. No lights. Just watching. My daughter asked if monsters were real. He swallowed hard. I didn't know how to answer. Aaliyah felt a surge of anger, not at him, but at the system that had twisted decent people into living ghosts. We in this today, she said. I'm getting that ledger. She held up the access card. Jordan's eyes flicked to it, full of fear and something like fragile hope. You'll have a 5-minute window, he warned. They run morning briefings from 7 to 7:10. Everyone but the patrol chief is usually in the conference room. His hands trembled as he pulled out a rough sketch of the office layout. The safe is behind a false panel in Dalton's office. He thinks he's clever, but the hinges give it away. Aaliyah memorized every detail, heart beating in steady, controlled rhythm. And Dalton? Where will he be? Jordan hesitated. If he's anywhere nearby, he won't let you walk out. She didn't have time to reassure him. She didn't have time to think about fear at all. She only had time for action. But fear found her anyway. 2 minutes after she left Jordan, a black SUV slid onto the road behind her, smooth, practiced, predatory. The kind of move initiated by someone who'd been watching her long before she noticed. In the reflection of her side mirror, Sheriff Dalton's unmistakable silhouette sat in the driver's seat. Her pulse spiked. He had found her. Aaliyah's mind raced. Her best chance was to reach a populated area, get close enough to witnesses that Dalton wouldn't risk escalating. But before she could even accelerate, 2 more vehicles appeared, one cutting her off in front, another sliding in behind. A perfect trap. She hit the brakes as dust exploded around her tires. Dalton stepped out of the SUV with the slow confidence of a wolf approaching prey it had already bitten. "Morning, Agent Carter," he called, voice dripping with mock courtesy. "Going somewhere?" Before she could answer, the other men, two deputies and one broad-shouldered outsider, yanked open her door. Her gun was stripped from her holster. Zip ties tightened around her wrists. A black hood dropped over her head, plunging her into suffocating darkness. She was shoved into a vehicle. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as they drove. The ride was long enough to disorient, but short enough to tell her they hadn't left the county. When the hood finally came off, she was inside a vast warehouse. Rusted metal beams towered overhead. Dust floated in afternoon light, slicing through broken windows. This was a place no one visited, a place no one would hear her if she screamed. Dalton stood in front of her, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Let's skip the foreplay," he said. "Sign the paper and walk away." One of the deputies shoved a single sheet toward her. It was a confession letter, claiming she'd fabricated allegations, impersonated an agent, suffered from psychological stress, and wished to apologize for causing confusion. Aaliyah almost laughed at the audacity. "No," she said. Dalton sighed dramatically. "You know, part of me hoped you'd be smart." He nodded at the broad-shouldered man, who stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Now things get harder." But Aaliyah raised her bound wrists calmly. "Before you do anything," she said, "I want you to look at this." She lifted her arm enough to reveal the black sports watch on her wrist. Dalton snorted. "A watch? You planning to time your beating?" "It's a GPS tracker," she said evenly. "Standard issue for undercover agents in high-risk areas." Dalton's expression slipped, just for a breath, but enough. She pressed on. "The moment my heart rate spiked during your traffic stop this morning, the watch sent a distress signal. Continual tracking. Location updates. Biometric alerts. All of it went straight to a federal tactical team." The room changed. The outsider froze. The deputies exchanged worried glances. Dalton's jaw tightened. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Aaliyah nodded subtly toward the open warehouse doors. "Am I?" "Listen." At first, the air was silent. Then, faint, distant sirens. Many of them. Growing louder. Closer. Surrounding. Dalton's eyes widened as the sound became undeniable. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The warehouse doors erupted inward. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Agents in tactical gear flooded the space, weapons raised with disciplined precision. Dalton reached for his holster. Too slow. A rubber bullet slammed into his chest, dropping him to the concrete with a howl of pain. The outsider went face down immediately. One deputy tried to run but was tackled before he reached the exit. The other froze with both hands in the air, trembling violently. Aaliyah exhaled a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. An older agent approached, broad-shouldered, silver hair, steady voice. "Agent Carter, stand still. I'll cut you free." His knife sliced the zip ties. "I'm Agent Marcus Rain, Houston Field Office," he said. "When your signal hit, we mobilized immediately." Aaliyah rubbed her wrists, feeling the blood return to her fingers. "How did you know I needed help?" Rain's expression darkened. "Because we've been tracking your supervisor. We suspected internal compromise. Your distress signal confirmed everything." Relief washed over her, heavy and overwhelming. The nightmare was breaking open at last. Dalton, groaning on the ground, still tried to fight the truth. "You think this means anything?" he spat. "You think they'll believe her?" Rain crouched beside him, lifting Dalton's badge off his chest with chilling calm. "They don't have to believe her," he said. "We have you. On kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, extortion, money laundering. 20 years worth of crimes." Dalton's face drained of color. Instant karma finally found him. As agents hauled the sheriff away, Aaliyah stood in the middle of the warehouse, breathing in the dusty, sharp air of justice long overdue. She wasn't done, far from it. The press conference awaited. The victims awaited. The truth awaited. Rain placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll escort you to Austin," he said. "The whole country deserves to hear what you uncovered." Aaliyah nodded. This was more than an arrest. This was a turning point. The moment a silenced town finally got its voice back. And she was walking out of that warehouse, not as a hunted woman, but as the force that would bring Ridgewell's corruption crumbling down. The morning of the press conference broke with a strange kind of quiet, like Ridgewell itself was holding its breath, waiting for something it had never experienced before: truth without fear. The conference hall in Austin buzzed with reporters, lights, cables, and the electrifying hum of breaking news. Aaliyah stood behind the curtain, watching through a narrow gap as journalists filled the room, murmuring, adjusting microphones, preparing for revelations they could barely imagine. Her palms were steady, her breath controlled. She had faced armed men in a dark warehouse just hours earlier. A room full of cameras no longer intimidated her. If anything, this was where she had always belonged, standing between the public and the corruption that thrived in their blind spots. Maya Thornton, fierce and composed, stood at the podium. "Thank you all for coming. What you are about to hear will change the landscape of law enforcement oversight in this state," she said, her voice crisp. A hush fell over the room. For 17 months, Special Agent Aaliyah Carter conducted a high-risk undercover investigation inside Ridgewell County. Yesterday morning, she was kidnapped by local officials attempting to silence her. Camera shutters snapped, capturing the gravity of the words. Maya continued, but she survived. And today, the truth survives with her. She gestured toward the curtain. Aaliyah stepped onto the stage. For a moment, every camera turned toward her, a sea of lenses reflecting back a world about to finally understand what she had endured. She placed her hands on the podium and lifted her chin. "My name is Special Agent Aaliyah Carter," she began, her voice resonant and unwavering. "For nearly a year and a half, I documented a corruption network operating inside Ridgewell County. Extortion, forced payments, threats, falsified arrests, and financial laundering involving local officials and offshore accounts." Gasps rippled through the room. Aaliyah continued. "Yesterday, Sheriff Warren Dalton kidnapped me in an attempt to force a false confession. He failed, and the evidence gathered over these months is now secured by federal authorities." At her signal, Maya tapped a button on a console. Audio filled the speakers, Sheriff Dalton's unmistakable voice discussing migrant extortion, payment splits, and Cayman Island bank accounts. Journalists leaned forward. Screens behind Aaliyah displayed photographs of ledger pages, bank statements, timestamps, and the warehouse footage of Dalton's arrest. The room erupted in murmurs and furious note-taking. When she finished presenting the evidence, the questions came like rainfall, fast, relentless, hungry for clarity. Aaliyah answered what she could, and when she couldn't, Maya stepped in. The retired federal judge authenticated the documents on live camera, lending weight that no official could dismiss. The press conference ran longer than scheduled, but nobody left. The country now understood the magnitude of what had been hiding in a small Texas town and the courage it took to expose it. By the end of the day, the news had flooded every major station. Social media exploded with hashtags calling for justice, reform, and recognition. Aaliyah became the face of the investigation, not because she wanted fame, but because the public needed someone to represent resilience, integrity, and the reality that even the darkest systems could be dismantled. 2 weeks later, the Justice Department announced sweeping indictments. Dalton, the mayor, the district attorney, several deputies, and even Aaliyah's corrupted supervisor were charged with an array of crimes: conspiracy, obstruction, extortion, money laundering, kidnapping of a federal agent, and more. The FBI launched an internal review. The governor authorized a full overhaul of Ridgewell's law enforcement. The mold had been cut out. Now the rebuilding could begin. 3 months later, the transformation was visible. Aaliyah returned to Ridgewell, this time not undercover, not hiding. She drove through streets that seemed brighter, not because the buildings had changed, but because the air no longer carried the same suffocating fear. Businesses had reopened. People walked with unclenched shoulders. And for the first time in decades, community meetings were filled with real voices, not just polite nods under pressure. The new sheriff, Rachel Mendez, a former deputy who had once been threatened into silence, stood tall at her swearing-in ceremony. The room overflowed with families, former victims, and local leaders finally free to speak without trembling. When Rachel raised her right hand and repeated her oath, Aaliyah felt something warm settle in her chest. Not pride, not victory, something deeper, something like healing. After the ceremony, Rachel approached her with a firm handshake and an emotional smile. "You gave us our town back," she said. "We won't forget it." Aaliyah shook her head softly. "The people here always had strength," she replied. "They just needed room to use it." As she walked outside, sunlight washed over the newly painted sign outside the sheriff's office. "Protect and serve all residents." A simple slogan, finally made true. Her final stop was at a small restaurant, Maria's Kitchen, its new sign bright and welcoming. Inside, warm spices filled the air, and the sound of laughter bounced off the walls. Maria, the woman Aaliyah had seen crying at the gas station, looked up from behind the counter. Her face lit with joy. "Agent Carter." Maria rushed over, pulling her into a tight, grateful hug. "You did it. You really did it." Aaliyah returned the embrace gently. "You did it too," she said. "Your courage that day mattered more than you know." Maria led her to a wall decorated with photos of community events, new beginnings, and one framed picture of the press conference. Below it, "To the woman who helped us breathe again." Aaliyah's throat tightened. She blinked away the moisture gathering in her eyes. "I want you to meet someone," Maria said, waving over a shy young girl hiding behind her apron. "This is my daughter. She wants to be an FBI agent now. Because of you." The girl stepped forward, clutching a notebook. "Will you sign it?" she whispered. Aaliyah knelt, taking the notebook carefully. "Only if you promise something," she said. The girl nodded. "Promise you'll use your voice. Even when it's hard. Even when you're scared." The girl nodded again, braver this time. Aaliyah signed her name, adding a small note. "Courage grows when shared." Later, as she walked to her car, Aaliyah paused outside the restaurant and looked back. Life, laughter, possibilities. They filled the space where fear once lived. She exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle deep inside her. The FBI had offered her a leadership role in a newly formed corruption task force. She accepted. There were more Ridgewells out there. More towns suffocating under powerful men who believed no one would ever hold them accountable. More people waiting for a single spark to ignite change. And Aaliyah Carter had become that spark. Justice wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast. But it was possible. And sometimes, all it took was one person refusing to look away. As she drove out of Ridgewell for the last time, sunlight glinted off her windshield. The road ahead stretched wide, open, full of new missions and new truths waiting to be uncovered. But she carried something with her, something she had earned through fire, fear, and unbreakable resilience. The knowledge that even the deepest corruption can be uprooted when courage refuses to bow.